TrainerRoad have done days, if not weeks of podcasts. They've got forums, they've got training articles. They give a lot of good advice. But there is one piece of advice that continually comes up that I wholeheartedly disagree with. And it's the idea that in the middle of a training effort, that it's okay to stop pedaling and backpedal to give yourself a break when it's getting too hard. Let me break it down. I've got this, now they mention this all the time, but I got this article up here. It's about workout bailouts. And one of the sections is backpedaling. So, quite simply, turn the pedals backwards for the intended duration. So for example, in a 3-minute VO2 max interval, you might include a 30-second back pedal, while a 10-minute sweet spot interval might contain 2 or 3 back pedals lasting no more than 10 seconds each. I think this is terrible advice. This is the worst thing you can do in a training effort. If a training effort's getting really hard, the thought that someone's going, oh, this is getting too hard, I can't hold this anymore, I give in. I'm gonna backpedal, I'm gonna take a break and finish it off, is so terrible for your mental toughness, for your mental resilience. It will really damage your training long term. I'm gonna get into the physiology side of things and a little bit more detail in the second half of the video. But please, if you're watching this video, it is never okay to quit in the middle of a hard interval. Think about this if this was any other sport. If you are, let's say, swimming, or probably a better example, running. If you are a runner, you're with your coach running around a track doing 400-meter effort, so 1 lap around the running track, and you get halfway around the lap and you're struggling to hold your pace target for that lap. You wouldn't just stop and walk, take a 15-second break, and then finish the lap off. No way, the coach would go off at you. It's like the worst thing you could possibly do. It's quitting, it's giving in. Similar thing, like even back when I was rowing, this was like the golden rule when you're on the erg rowing, was like, it doesn't matter what happens during an effort, doesn't matter how you're going, you always finish it. You never stop, because as soon as you only need to stop a couple of times in training, and you're building up this habit that as you get in the pain barrier, as you're in the red, as you're starting to push your limits, that if you have that habit that I'm just going to stop now, it's getting too hard, you're not actually building the mental toughness. One of the main parts of training isn't just to get fitter, it's to build your mental toughness, your mental resilience, the tools that you use mentally when you're in the red to push yourself harder. And if you're giving yourself an out by backpedaling in the middle of an effort, you are not building that up. So I would say, blanket statement, it is never okay to stop in the middle of a hard effort. All right, so let's go into the weeds a little bit more on this and discuss this in some more detail and nuance. So I think what they're saying here is this is applying to workouts done on the trainer in erg mode, because I can't imagine, let's say you're doing these 3-minute VO2 max efforts. If you're doing them up a climb, you're not just gonna back off for 30 seconds in the middle of an effort and then get back on the pedals to finish it off. If you're going up a climb, like, no way. Like, that is such a bad habit. What you do if you're on a climb on the road, if you were struggling to hold the power target, you would just hold a little bit power. You'd still push yourself to the limits, like push yourself mentally. But yeah, maybe at the top, when you finish the 3 minutes, you're 5 watts off what your power target is. That's fine. Like, if you gave it your all, that's fine. So that's what you do on the road. But obviously in erg mode, if it's holding you to that power target and you can't physically hold it, you've got a few options. And to me, backpedaling is never an option. Just don't even consider that. It should never be an option to just stop in the middle of a hard effort. So what you could do on the trainer would be, I would say the best thing, the optimal scenario here is you turn erg mode off and you do efforts self-paced without erg mode. So if you are 2 minutes in and you feel like you're not going to be able to hold a power target, you just do what you would do on the road and shift up a gear so it's into one lighter gear and just drop the power target down a little bit. You can use the little adjusters. Like on Zwift, for example, you could turn it down a few percent. So instead of doing the effort at 300 watts, for example, you can just knock the little buttons down in the top left on Zwift. So you're doing them at 290 instead. That's fine, but again, I don't really like that too much, because then it's up to you. You're dictating the power in Zwift, and then you're holding it. Whereas it's better to just be in free ride mode, and you're just pushing yourself as much as you can within the limits of what how deep you're willing to go, if that makes sense. So you're building that mental toughness to push yourself harder, and you're not having the trainer dictate that to you. The physiology side of things in terms of taking breaks in the middle of an effort is also quite interesting because having breaks in the middle of an effort, in my opinion, really changes the training stimulus that you're going to get. I think sometimes what TrainerRoad say and what they're kind of saying here is that, let's say you got a 3-minute effort, you're better off, I don't agree with this by the way, but they're saying you're better off doing, let's say you're going to do 3 minutes at 300 watts, but you get 2 minutes in and you're on the limit. Logically, and purely from time in zones, you might say, well, it's better to do 2 minutes of that, have a 15-second break where you're backpedaling, and then finish off the 45 seconds at the 300 watts. So that way, you've got 2 minutes 45 at your target power of 300 watts, and you've got your 15 seconds freewheeling. But it only takes a basic understanding of physiology to know that if you have a 15-second break in the middle of a 3-minute effort, that massively changes the stimulus that session's going to give you. So, especially as you get fitter, the speed with which your body recovers and returns to a baseline, the speed at which your lactate levels in your blood drop off, your heart rate drops off, your respiration rate drops, your oxygen consumption drops. It all happens very quickly. Even 15 or 20 seconds, you're really dropping that. So even though on paper, you might say, well, I got 2 minutes 45 out of a 3-minute effort done, so it's very close. Physiologically, that's not very close if you had a 15-second break in the middle of a 3-minute effort. In my opinion, what would match that more physiologically would to be do the 3 minutes consistently, but just do it, instead of 300 watts, do it at 295 or do it at 290. That difference isn't that much. The difference between 2 minutes 45 with a 15-second break in the middle, even though it's at the target power, is massive. And that's why I don't really like this time in zones approach to assessing intervals and efforts, because time in zones doesn't equate to physiology. Like, we know how quickly you can recover when you give your body a rest. So even like from a physiology point of view, I don't think backpedaling is a good way to get through an effort, because it entirely changes the stimulus you're going to get out of the session. All right, just quickly, a couple more points on the mental side of things. One of the other reasons why I really don't like this idea that it's okay just to stop and give yourself a break when it gets really hard is that this situation never applies in a race. If you're going up a 5-minute climb in a race, and you're on your limits and you're really struggling and you're towing that line between, oh, I'm almost there, I'm almost going to drop, I'm almost there. You need to train that in training, the ability to suffer and to switch off, to practice mindfulness, whatever mental tricks you're using, you need to practice that in training. And if every time in training when it's gotten that hard, if you've let yourself off the hook and just stop the effort, you're going to be in a race one day and you're not going to be used to that ability to just sit on the red line. So it's really important, like whether you're going up a climb or maybe you're ripping off the front of a crit at the start, trying to establish a break, you're ripping turns with two other guys and you're on the wheel and your eyes are closed and you can barely breathe and your body's begging you to stop. You're like, hell no, I'm just keeping pressure on the pedals and pressure on the pedals. The ability to do that and push hard really well comes in part from your training, from doing that in training. And that's just, again, if you're not putting yourself through that in training, you're completely missing out. Now, you could argue that, well, I'm not going to backpedal on every hard effort. This is just a trick you can use once a month or once every few months in one of those really hard workouts. But I really think this type of thing is a habit that's very easy to fall into, a trap that's very easy. Like, you do this, because I've literally been through this back when I was rowing and when I'm cycling. Like, I know from a fact, from experience, you only need to give into this 1, 2, or 3 times and you're done with. Because anytime you get back in there and you're in a hard effort, you're going to let yourself off the hook. So you can't ever do this, in my opinion, because as soon as you do it, it's going to be a really difficult habit to get out of. Okay, just to wrap this up, I just want to point out one other sentence from this TrainerRoad article, and they say this: bailouts are not encouragement to take the easy road when intensity and suffering are the order of the day. Intervals, by their very nature, hurt. And when you bypass this discomfort, it will come at the expense of your training progress. The take-home message is to use these sparingly, only when you need them, and not simply when you want them. Big difference. The problem I have with this is, you always want to backpedal. When you're in the middle of a freaking VO2 max effort, and your heart rate's at max, and you're on the limit, you always want to take the easy road out. And if you let yourself do that even a few times. You're just going to develop the habit to do it. So you can't, it's not these things where you can sometimes use it. It's a blanket, never use this, because TrainerRoad are trying to have their cake and eat it and say, well, we want you to push yourself very hard and train your mental toughness. But if the interval will get too hard, then it's okay to bail out. And the problem is there, you can't have both, because part of pushing yourself and extending your pain barrier and building a mental toughness involves not quitting. That is how you that's how you build mental toughness, is by pushing through that and extending that out as you get fitter, as you get more experienced athlete. And you're not going to be able to do that if in the back of your mind you think, well, if it does get slightly too hard, I can backpedal. You can't have that thought even creep into your mind. So again, pretty big one. It's pretty black and white for me. I don't see this as too contentious. I think bailing out by backpedaling, freewheeling, or stopping in the middle of a very hard effort is a terrible idea and something you should never do. All right, so you thought that was going to be the end of the video. No, if you stayed around this long, just one other thing I want to bring up, because if you're paying attention, you watch this channel, you might be like, Jesse, you're a hypocrite because you just did this exact thing in that tempo session you did a few weeks ago. So that video I did, I swapped my endurance rides for tempo. I was planning on doing 2.5 or 3 hour tempo from the door session. I got 2 hours in and I called it quits because I was dehydrated and I didn't want to push myself to the limit. I see where you're coming from. The difference there is that wasn't intended to be a maximal effort session. I got 2 hours into that and my heart rate was fine. I wasn't at maximal exertion, but I made a decision to stop the session there because I felt the rest wasn't going to be productive and I was just going to be dragging myself over hot coals to finish that session when I didn't want to be doing that in a tempo session. I would say this sort of bailout thing should only apply to maximal effort sessions, and you're only really going to get that when you're doing threshold or VO2 max effort sessions. TrainerRoad in this thing did say, like, during a sweet spot session, you can do really short bailouts, which I don't quite understand. Like, if you're doing a sweet spot session and you're absolutely on the limit to the point where you feel like you need to do back pedals, I'm not sure what's going on there, because by definition, sweet spot workouts shouldn't be maximal unless you're doing, like, I don't know, 2 hours at sweet spot or something. If you're doing like 20-minute sweet spot repeats, you shouldn't be on your limit. There's something going on there if you're feeling like you're absolutely on your knees and you need to quit in the middle of a sweet spot effort. You should only be at the point of using a bailout like this when you're pushing yourself maximally, in which case you shouldn't use them anyway. Is kind of what I'm trying to say. If you're doing, a tempo ride or sweet spot efforts and you're making a conscious decision to stop an effort or stop a training session because you feel like you're digging yourself a hole, that's sort of a different story. That is it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, got something out of it, and I'll catch you in the next one.